Well, Oleanna was a play I wrote about 25 years ago, and I would always have fascinated by a piece in the Hamlet where Hamlet hires these strolling players, and he says to his sidekick Horatio, he says, I want you to stage a play, something like The Murder of Gonzago, where this wife kills a husband and marries the uncle, much like my mother and so forth. And he says, I've heard that guilty creatures sitting at a play may, by the cunning of the set of scene, be so moved as to confess their own malefactions. And I'm thinking, well, that's cute, but it's certainly not true. You know, you can't get somebody, however guilty or however upset at a play, to start confessing their own malefactions. Okay, Shakespeare, you know, you wrote a lot of good stuff, we'll give you a pass. So then I write this play called Oleanna, which was about at the beginning of this whole nonsense about political correctness and incipient fascism and the end of free speech and all that other good stuff. And I put it off Broadway. We did it first in Cambridge, Mass., and then we went off Broadway. And it's about this young woman student and her professor. And she's confused, and she doesn't know why she got such a bad grade. And he says, well, okay, let me help you, let me devote myself to you, blah, blah, blah. I'll talk you through the thing. You know what, the grade doesn't count, I'll just give you an A. She said, but I don't understand. I don't understand that I'm the first of my family ever came to college, so I don't understand how this works. And I worked like mad to get here. You can just assign me a grade? He says, yes, that's right. He says, education's nonsense. He says, we give you a lot of books and we say, read them. You say you've read them. I say you're lying. We're going to give you a test. We're going to find out you lied. And when we find out you lied, you'll be disgraced and your life will be ruined. He says, that's the educational process. She says, but then I'm really confused. She says, why are you involved in it? And he says, because I love teaching. She says, no, she says, I'm lost. I'm really, really lost. Things begin to escalate. And he says, listen, you got stuff stuck into your head early on about what the educational process should be. He says, I'll give you an example. He says, when I was a kid, I heard that poor people make love more frequently than rich people, but they take less of their clothes off. He says, is that true? He says, I don't know. He says, is the person who said it, do they know if it's true? I don't know. It's stuck in my head. Why? I don't know, but there it is. He says, I don't have time to go through and rip out all this stuff, but it's operating against me. It's clogging up my head. You have a prejudice about education. It should be X, Y, Z. That got stuck in there. So they go on, blah, 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 blah. She gets radicalized because the president, the guy won't help her. And so she seeks out, what happens at college. You know, I went to a feral, hippy-dippy-sippy college, right? Sex and drugs and radicalization. You know, there I am playing poker and listening to the Beatles, and the weathermen over there staging guns to blow up the building on 11th Street. I didn't know who they were. Yeah, and my roommates, they went underground for 30 years, right? Because from having dealt with kids in this age range, 17 to 22, the door is closing. There's a good reason that healthy societies take these kids and put them in the military, right? Because they need a lot of discipline, right? They don't need a lot of exuberance, they got that. They don't need a lot of inspiration, they got that. They need someone to say, for this amount of time, do this, don't do that, shut up, right? So the Mormons, whom I love, right, for many reasons, one of which is they're the smartest people in the world, because they say to these kids, you know, why don't you go to like Bolivia for a couple of years and convert people, right? So whether or not they're converting people, I hope they are, they're getting the kids out of the house. And they're saying, I can't be your parents anymore, which is a great thing. And in ancient Rome, they used to have the tradition of guest parentage, where they would take a young, I don't know if they were boys and girls, certainly boys, at the age of like 8, and they would swap kids. So I'm going to raise your kid, you raise mine. And we've all had this experience. You say, I don't understand. I can't do anything with my son. Uncle Timmy comes in, and they're the best buds. And he's behaving like an 8. That's because, right, because the kid doesn't have to rebel against Uncle Timmy. So you take kids in the age range 17 to 22. Now we're sticking them in college where they learn to, march around with signs and burn effigies and so forth. That's all good fun. But what about preparing for the wider world? It's not going to prepare them for the wild. They could do it on the weekends. If you do it all the time, you're going to be very, very confused. So what happens to kids who are very, very confused? They have the capacity to become radicalized because they, just like gangs, right? Gangs are an attempt of young people with insufficient structure to find structure. It's perfectly logical. Of course they need structure. The result may be unfortunate, but the urge is absolutely logical. So young kids at college, they form gangs, right? And one of the gangs, young kids can get radicalized. Any cause, right or left, American, anti-American, Islamic, Zionist, anti-Zionist, they can get radicalized. They say, I'm going to put all my energy because I finally found the truth. I didn't know what the truth was because I'm confused. I didn't go into the military where they said the truth is make your bed or you go into the brig. That's the truth. The rest of it you can figure out on your own. They got nobody to tell them make your bed, So what are they? They're going to say, I want the truth. Someone says, here's the truth. The educational system is misogynistic and it's male-oriented, and you've just been taken advantage of. This is what the young girl goes out off stage. She gets radicalized. So of course she's going to listen to the person who says, I have the truth and I will protect you. So the college is not protecting her. Her parents aren't protecting her. The group is protecting her. She says, yeah. So the group tells her, wait a second, that guy put his arm around you and he talked to you about people taking off their clothes and making love? Oh my God, you've just been raped. So the girl says, wait a second. He said, nope, under the college code of sexual ethics, that constitutes rape. Let's ruin the professor's life. So the girl comes back to the professor in Act 2 and Act 3, and eventually they end up almost killing each other. It's a dreadful, dreadful situation. And it so raised the audience to a fever pitch that they would scream at the stage every night. They'd scream at the stage. They wouldn't do it on purpose. They just find themselves screaming. Every night, there would be fights within the audience at the end of the thing, a man and a woman, and they wouldn't always take the same side. How can you say that? How can you say that? Pointing finger, marriage is breaking up. It was great. And then the woman who, my wife, Rebecca Pidgeon, played the young girl, and William H. Macy played the man. And the woman who replaced Rebecca, I don't know if I mentioned it, was my good friend Mary McCann, did it for a year. And she once got actually punched coming out of the dressing room by an audience member. People were screaming. And because it drove them nuts. The fact that, and I thought it was marvelous, the fact that I could look at an impossible problem and say, well, okay, let's take it up to 11 now. Let's see where that goes. Ain't that fun? I wrote a play called Race. And Race was a play, it was on Broadway. It was Kerry Washington, David Alan Grier, Richard Thomas, and James Spader. And it was about another very, very, very provocative case. Things get, the question is, who become the writers? The people who are affronted by something in youth or who don't understand. So a lot of writing, especially my writing, is an attempt to understand, to work something out in a way that it can be understood. Because a lot of human equations don't come out even on a day-to-day scale, but perhaps they can be understood poetically. They can be understood mythologically. So our country's been fighting about race now, right, for 230 years, and there are all of these cases coming up, pro and con. I say, well, gosh, it would be a terrible, terrible idea to write a play about such a provocative topic. Here I go. And so I wrote it. So the play is, there are these two lawyers, black guy and a white guy. The white guy is James Spader, black guy is David Alan Grier. And they have another associate, a young woman lawyer, Kerry Washington. And they take on a new client who's a white guy, Richard Thomas, who's accused of raping a black woman. So the question is whether or not they're going to take on his case. He's a billionaire. And so I wrote this long expository scene, when he comes in this, when he comes in that, it says in the paper this, blah, 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 blah. And then there's a speech at the end where the African-American lawyer played by David Alan Grier says, okay, wait a second. He says, you want me to tell you about you want to tell me, Mr. White Man, about black people? I'll help you. Dr. King was a saint. He was killed by a jealous husband. Malcolm X became saintly when he embraced nonviolence. Prior to that, he was misguided. You never actually fucked a black girl, but one sat next to you in science class, and she was really kind of shy. And the other guy says, wait a second. The white guy says, I would never say any of that stuff. So the black guy says, you're goddamn right you wouldn't. Because you know what a white guy can say to a black guy about race? Nothing. You're goddamn right. Nothing. He says, you white people think, he said, let me put you out of your misery. You white people think that black people hate you. You're right. We absolutely do. He said, I want you coming in with your white bullshit and your rich bullshit about how you were wronged. So the white guy says, she made a false accusation. So the black guy says, well, which of us is immune? So the white guy says, she said she loved me. And the black guy says, well, I guess she changed her mind because it says here, she says you raped her. So I'm looking at this as 35 minutes into the play. I'm thinking, man, if you don't start the play with this speech, you're stupider than I think you are. Right? So all of a sudden we rip the Band-Aid off the subject of race, where this black guy says, I don't care if you don't ever like it, this is the truth, you want to talk or not. So the whole beginning of the play becomes this black and white couple saying to the white rich guy, you want to talk or not? Right? You want to tell the truth or not? I don't give a shit, right? But you're paying us to defend you. I don't even want the case, but you're paying us to defend you. I'm going to tell you the truth. And so I thought it was just electrifying. And the audience, God bless them, they loved it. It was thrilling.